Welcome to the Internet of Things equation, a podcast when I talk about the Internet of Things domain both from the technical and business perspectives. I'm Lukasz Paciorkowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer. Hello, my today's guest studied artificial intelligence, worked in various IT roles, and finally settled in the biotech business, where he founded two companies, A4BEE and Modica. Hello, Lukasz. Thank you for accepting my invitation to talk today.
Hi, Lukasz. Good to be here.
So you made a fascinating journey, like from IT to the biotech. Could you summarize it for the audience? How have you started, and what made you focus on the biotech at the very end?
Sure. So I started, my core is definitely in IT. I studied the IT technologies and I was interested in it. But my professional career went towards a consulting business. I was working in IBM and Accenture later on. Not only in Poland, I also moved to Austria and work on different markets. But from the very beginning of my consulting career, I was very much mixing two parts, which is a business, why we do things and why we want to implement this or that, and the technology, meaning how we do it. And that was more or less which shaped the way how I look and think about technological topics. I really start with the question why. And since I started with the IT, I went for the more generic path of programming, afterwards integration, and then I landed on overall architecture, solution architecture. So it was both business design and technical design. And later on, I started to work a lot with the cloud, and together with the cloud, IoT concept started to take off very much. And that was one of my roles in the consulting companies. At some point, I started to, one of my projects was with one of the life science companies, life science biotech companies. And I found it super interesting because it required me to merge everything which I learned until now. It was a strategy, consulting, technology, a lot of business, very much technical areas which I never touched, which is the industrial automation and liquid handling and many other things. So I thought, okay, this is super interesting. At the same time, more or less, I started to think that whatever I do in the big companies like IBM and Accenture, I potentially could do also setting up my own company in Poland and promoting a little bit of Polish engineers and Polish science. And this is when A4BEE came to be. And I thought that if I'm already setting up my own company, I would like to do something which really matters. And this is where the biotech really kicks in. I believe strongly that biotech is really reshaping this century for humankind. Everybody talks about AI, and that's fine. It's definitely a technology foundation which enables a lot of progress for many industries. But the biotech itself, I think, will have a profound impact and already has a profound impact on humankind, right? We have a chance to cure diseases, make people live longer, have less health problems. But in order to do that, you need to mix so many different branches of both technology, science, and business. It's super exciting. That's why I think biotech has for me, had the biggest part of a purpose and an impact which I could do. Previously, I was doing the financial systems, big business systems, and so on, but it doesn't have the same level of purpose and doesn't give you such a drive to really innovate than biotech.
Yeah, I totally understand your point. And
Yeah,
in my opinion, IoT is extremely cross-domain, as you said, right? You need to use your knowledge from all of those different domains in order to provide some meaningful outcome. And we will dive much deeper into the biotech domain today. I agree with you that that is probably one of the best areas to work with if you want to do something good. Like as I said, like you could use the whole capability of IoT for good, right? And probably
yeah,
biotech is as close to that as possible. But let's start with the business because you've got a very similar background to myself. Like you've got broad IT skills, but starting IoT business is a tricky task. What is your take? The domain knowledge or broad IT skills? What's more important for someone thinking about starting an IoT business?
Right. First of all, I would say I would probably not call myself straightforward IoT business, because we are doing going beyond the whatever IoT is. Concept is definitely in the very center of what we are doing. Although what we like to say about ourselves is that we are really focusing on solving problems, providing a solutions to the problems. And this is the prerequisite for this, is that we have to be quite broad. We start with more soft things like strategy analysis, market research, consultancy, change management, trying to understand what is on the market, who is on the market, what products are on the market. And then we go to the more concrete things like architecture, design, both software, hardware, and products, sometimes programming, hardware prototyping, and so on. IoT goes across all of this. For example, from the business perspective, if you don't understand the economics of the IoT business, it will be super hard to make something useful. And I learned it the hard way. And since then, my perception of IoT really changed. So we can dive into this in a second. Nevertheless, when I think about really working with bigger companies who really have very complex problems to solve, IoT itself should not be approached from the technological part. I mean, if you know one platform from IoT and you want to implement it, that's fine. You're probably going more towards specialized software house type of solutions. I don't think it's something which will help you grow. I think at the end of the day, and what I learned, as I mentioned, the hard way, is IoT itself doesn't provide you much of a business value. There was a lot of hype around it. It costs money. Economics of the scaling up of IoT platform is super difficult. What you need to understand is business. What you need to understand is the industrial problems which you are solving. Why do you want to connect the data and so on? We heard, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, a lot of those funny ideas of connecting toasters, right? Proverbial toaster to the cloud. But what for, right? It costs money, it causes problems, and it provides almost zero value. Understanding the industry and understanding business problems is where you start. Afterwards, you work yourself up. You're going towards setting up the technological solution which solves those problems.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like IoT is simply a technical capability, right? But on its own,
Right.
it does not generate any value. Yeah, let's talk about the business value. You work to demystify the technical complexities in the biotech domain by leveraging the power of IoT, cloud, and AI. So that is a significant undertaking. Often IoT solutions even increase the complexity instead of reducing that. How have you achieved that goal? Because it looks like a very difficult task to manage.
Specifically, biotech is you need a lifetime to probably start to understand it a little bit more. So I still think I'm in the beginning of the journey to understand how technology can really impact biotech in a meaningful manner. But let's start with biotech itself. It's complex in its core, because we are really talking about a super regulated environment, right? And banking is regulated, right? Telcos are kind of regulated, but where you are producing drugs or food which people intake afterwards, right? They are swallowing it or eating it, and it can kill them. This is another level of scrutiny which you are exposed to, and there are specific bodies to do that. In US, it's famous FDA. We have also the agencies in Europe, in Asia, and so on, and they take care about the process, but the process of creating drugs, researching drugs, producing drugs. That's the top level where it's a must-have. So you need to understand it, both regulations, good practices, good manufacturing practices, good manufacturing, automation manufacturing practices, and many more. And then you are distill it down. Okay, so what does it mean for technology? Okay, technology has to be built in a specific way. Biotech is very close to also industrial automation. Automation and IT, those are two different beasts. In IT, it's security. In OT, it's rather safety. In IT, you search for amount of features which you can provide. In OT, it's about simplicity and reliability, that it should work in any conditions. So merging those two parts, bringing more advanced technology to the automation world, it's already complex by itself. putting on top of this all the regulations and how the software is being built, all the industrial standards, how the network should be segregated, and how the hardware should be built, that's another complex thing, right? And
So
then
sorry, let me jump in
yeah,
to clarify for the audience, because you mentioned the IT and OT. Could you
right.
briefly explain like those two areas and the challenges? That might be not obvious for everyone listening, and I think it's crucial to follow our discussion.
Sure. So I think when we talk about IoT, we mostly, I think people think about broad customer electronics, connection of some endpoints to the cloud and so on. This is when the term industrial IoT, IIoT came to be, right? And for me, it was always a definition of convergence of IT, information technologies, and OT, operational technologies. OT is everything which you see on the production plants, right? The machinery, the programming logic controllers, PLCs, the sensors, the heavy industrial stuff. And now, if you want to combine them with IT technologies, more lightweight technologies, which are rather digital, not so much about hardware, this is where you have to merge those two worlds. And as I mentioned before, right, safety, security, two things which are next to each other, but somehow they are competing. I mean, if you want to be in a safety space, you don't care so much about security because you don't want to kill people. You care less about that some hacker will steal something. You are just trying to fence your environment and not let anybody connect anything which they shouldn't. On the other hand, if you want to use the new IT technologies, you need to be secured. You cannot work with Windows 95, which happens quite often in the OT world, without support, without antivirus, basic stuff, and so on. And you have to merge those two worlds. Super difficult. You need to also look at the robustness, right? As I mentioned also before. So in OT world, in the automation, you need things which are simply working. And that's why you have a very simple computers, PLCs, which are doing in the infinite loop all the logic which you are coding on the low level kind of languages. In IT, well, most of people know how IT works, right? You have layers of the over layers of virtualization, different type of frameworks and so on. So at the end, a programmer who is creating some sort of functionality for the end user, he doesn't or she doesn't even really know how the full stack is working, because you are just getting hundreds of libraries here and there, putting the operating system, which again has thousands of libraries and so on. It's super difficult to manage your full stack. In OT, it's much more clearer and visible and simpler, and more difficult to build anything more advanced, because you really need to code a lot of stuff, and it's with the very simple structures and so on. And now if you combine those two things, those two worlds, you again have problems, right? You have a lot of bugs in IT. You always will have, because the complexity level is super high. OT world, where things have to be very concrete, the machine has to work in a very specific manner. There has to be low latency, and you need to understand what will happen next, right? The state machines and so on. This is not clearly compatible with IT. And at the end, what you could call industrial IoT, but again, if you look from the perspective of manufacturing and automation, IoT was kind of always there. You always had to have sensors on the machines, actuators on the machines, and you connected them to the control system, SCADA and so on. Does that mean the SCADA is IoT? I don't know. For me, it's a blend. Industrial IoT for the automation world is not new concept in a way. Industrial IoT, expanding it to the IT world, now that becomes a beast to tackle with. So here you also have a hint that setting up the company which works in this space requires at least those two parts: understanding the automation, different technologies, different products, different mentality, and understanding IT. Again, different things, data driven, functionality driven, also different speed of delivery. Everything is different. So
The mindset of IT people is totally opposite to the OT people, right? Like the IT people just care about features, and the OT people care about stability and basically keeping the production line up and running. I think that's the great point. And that's why I often tell to my customers that the cloud part is easy, because in case something is not working, we can destroy everything and rebuild in a few minutes. Like, there is no way for you to destroy and rebuild a production line like that easily, at least. That is a great segue to the next topic. Modica offers the drag and drop creation of a production line. I love that approach as it enables the ease of use for IoT, and ease of use is a huge topic in terms of IoT adoption and creating industrial IoT types of systems. So could you elaborate on that? How have you achieved that drag and drop capability in your solution?
First, maybe I would briefly discuss what Modica is, where it came from. We set up A4BEE 5 years ago, and we started to work with biotech and manufacturing customers, helping them to bring digital innovation to their pipelines, projects, products, and so on. And we started to see recurring patterns and things which are inherently taken from the past, meaning, okay, we do it this way because we did that in the past, and we want to continue doing it. And that's when bringing those two perspective, IT and OT, can sometimes help by challenging each world from the opposite side. So IT is challenging the OT world. Why are you doing it this way? I mean, there are new technologies which can serve this purpose. And from OT perspective, the IT can learn a lot when it comes to simplifying things. So we delivered those services. We saw the recurring patterns, difficulties which were there, super monolithical systems where change is difficult in the automation world, very heavy industrial platforms which allows you to do things in a simpler way, but at the same time they provide complexity of very big heavy platforms which are reliable but super not flexible. IT flexibility is everywhere, but then reliability, we can discuss it, right? So once we understood those things which potentially could be addressed differently, we said, okay, maybe as a soft service company, we could really productize some of those ideas. And things which we jumped on is overall modularization. And this is where our history is going in the two tracks at the same time. We are continuing working with our customers on their R&D projects. So I won't talk much about this because it's under heavy NDAs and still work in progress. But what we did there is we helped to introduce some sort of modularization on the hardware and software level to existing biotechnological solutions. Then we work with our partners and customers on bringing heavy industrial standards to the next level, meaning, okay, how we can enable the plug and play concept in the manufacturing, how we can enable discovery in the industrial network of different components, and how we can then put them together so they can work as a one line or one machine. And that's ongoing work, and you can see standards like OPC UA's European-centric way of approaching things. Heavy specification has its own problems, but it's start to have a nice adoption curve in Europe, at least. On top of OPC UA, you also have a new emerging standards, which is called, for example, MTP. It tries to bring in the automatic definition of what the machine is doing. So let's call it this way. The machine can expose specific file or specific description, which is standardized, and then other machine or the so-called process orchestration layer can understand what the machine is doing, and then you can easily connect one machine to another with creating recipes and so on, right? So this standard is interesting, and I think it's also picking up the speed, specifically in the process industry, chemical industry, biotech industry as well. And this is where we are going around and adding things and features which potentially will become the extension of this standard in the future by building different type of solutions with our customers and partners. By far, we are not the only driving force for it. In fact, our big customers are the ones who are pushing the industrial bodies into this direction, and it's interesting to watch. This is heavy standard. It requires quite a lot of understanding of very specific configurations and data structure and so on. So that's one thing which we are doing. On the other side, and in fact, it's a nice division between Europe and US, we see much pragmatic approach. In US, people looking at the manufacturing saying, okay, what technology works and is good enough? It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to cover everything, but it's much more lightweight, cheaper, and it works, right? It's very pragmatic. And then you can see a lot of manufacturers looking at the MQTT with additional things like spark plug standard, which is trying to somehow limit what you can put in the payload of the messaging and so on. But it's much more lightweight, much faster to implement. And this is what we are doing also in Modica, meaning instead of, we are building custom solutions for our customers based on those European hardcore standards and developing them together with partners. And for our own purposes, we are using those lightweight technologies, which somehow I see that US is looking in this direction. MQTT, Sparkplug, and we use also multicast DNS to find the devices in the network, the same as Chromecast is using, and so on. So we can really easily understand and find all the building blocks of the machine within the network, and then start to do what you ask for, which is basically drag and drop through the UI, connect the different parts of the machine so they start to work as a one machine. And that's in a very nutshell. So two ways: industrial part and more lightweight MQTT, also industrial. But
I love your take and the comparison that you provided for the OPC and MQTT, because I personally am a huge fan of MQTT, mostly for the reasons that you covered. It gives great flexibility, it's very lightweight, and it enables that many-to-many type of communication, which is crucial, in my opinion, to build an IoT ecosystem instead of that one-to-one type of information flow.
But let me comment on that. So we had those discussions over and over again. I mean, which to choose and so on. And some of our customers are more stubborn and they take a stand. They say, okay, OPC UA, this is what we are going to do. Modularization we will do with the MTP, which is currently being still developed as a standard. That's it, right? That's our golden standard, and take it or leave it. On the other hand, we see, as you said, this push towards MQTT and other protocols which are much more lightweight. And we said, okay, because in our core, we want to focus on a solution to the problem, not specific technology. Why don't we be flexible, right? So what we did in Modica, we are building our own hardware components. We are building our own electronics as well. And that's different reason. We can touch on it in a second. But we also started to work on our lightweight software platform, which basically allows also modularization on this level. If somebody wants to communicate with OPC UA and MTP standard, fine. We have one data source for a device, and it can talk OPC UA. But if somebody wants MQTT, Sparkplug, and so on, or even Modbus and other more industrially known interfaces, fine. We can add a plugin to the Sparkplug, MQTT, we can add Modbus, we can add serial, whatever. We don't care. This is software at the end, so it's much easier to do than achieve modularization in the hardware space, which, by the way, we are also trying to tackle. So as I mentioned in the beginning, modularization is in the heart of Modica. So we modularize on the level of hardware components from which you are building a machine, from the electrical components from which you are building a component, then from the software on top of which you are building your functionalities. That's how we approach it.
I don't want to go too far from the main topic of our today's meeting, but you mentioned one thing, and I would like to get your thoughts on it. You are building your own hardware, and in the IoT space, there is always that fight between build custom solution or buy something off the shelf. What's your take on that? I expect that you probably are on the build side because the mentality. But yeah, if you just could give us like very 5 minutes
Right.
hot take between build and buy.
I mean, it's similar discussion in the industrial world. If you see that big machines on the production line from biotech, and you open the control box, it is built based on the standard off-the-shelf components, right? I mean, you can have Siemens, Allen Bradley, whatever PLC. You have a different IO cards from vendors and plenty other things, including industrial PC inside the box, which is off-the-shelf component. On the other hand, you see guys like, let's say, Tesla, who are redefining it, and they are saying, okay, we will not get the ready components, we will build and integrate everything on a single board, which we will own. And I think it's similarly in IoT space. I mean, you can take Raspberry Pi, Arduinos, or any other ESP boards which are readily available, and then try to wrap it around. And that's fine. You can build some product for it, right? But you're getting to the point where you want to do something more sophisticated, less standard. And you start to see that, okay, you need to add this component off the shelf plus this component. The integration is not perfect. So you have wirings, you have some add-ons. It starts to look like a Frankenstein. And at the end, you don't have this sleek design, and you have much more functionality which you don't need because it's commercial off-the-shelf component. And then you want to squeeze it down to the smaller footprint. And then you are ending up with the discussion of how much will it cost me to create my own board, which is doing exactly what I need. There is an also economical part of it. What we are trying to do in Modica, which I didn't properly introduce, is to try to build a modular design for building a machines, in fact, for biotech in this specific case, but in fact, any type of machine. So you can really build your machine from the Lego bricks. You put one pump to the sensor, to this and that, and then it should just work like Lego bricks are working. When it comes to the physical connection, you also connect the software, and then you start to use it. Suddenly from 7 different components, you have one machine. When it comes to the shape of those things, you have to build them. Then when it comes to the electronics in it, they have to fit into this. Now you will have probably 20, 30, maybe at some point 100 different types of components which you need to build in those blocks. If you want to have a commercial off-the-shelf components for each and every of those, and there will be different needs, you will have a lot of suppliers, you will have a lot of integration issues. So we decided that, okay, at this stage, it's better to build a one platform, easy to extend, which has features which are core for us, and then you can build additional extension boards and extension plugins, whatever, on hardware and software level. Certification, right? You need to get CE, FCC if you want to sell in US. You start to have one thing, one setup, not multiple ones. The question is not, do you like better custom or commercial off the shelf? The question is, again, economics and business. How much faster will you be with building your own, which is not fast, right? You need to have iterations. You always do something wrong, and then you need to have 15 versions of the same board and so on. Or you buy something which is already working, but at some point, all the combinations and so on requires you to recertify, change, adjust, and you don't have a control over it. There is no one good answer, this or that way. It depends. If you want to go fast, go with commercial off the shelf. If you want to build a longer strategy where you really own it, you really have an influence on how it's being built, and you really want to have a differentiation, then you have to build your own.
What I often suggest to my customers, especially those without experience, is start with off-the-shelf solution,
Correct.
learn, maybe
Exactly.
try a few vendors, and then you will have the experience and you will be ready to design your custom build solution and really make the difference. Because starting from custom solution without understanding what you're doing, that won't do any good for you.
That's perfect advice. First learn, and the best you learn what works and what doesn't work is to use something which is already existing. Yes, perfect.
Let's go back to the main topic of our discussion. You implement the bioprocess automation. Could you
Right.
describe a sample bioprocess? So how does it look and what are the approaches to automate it?
Right. So that's a kind of nightmare in a way, because again, of specificity related to the biotech. I would divide the biotech automation in two worlds. One is the manufacturing, which has a much higher rigor of standardization standards and also validation qualification and what is expected from the control bodies like FDA. And there is not much room for being too creative, right? It has to work. And in fact, the way how you build entire stack machine and the production line is very well detailed. You need to have evidences and documents and tests and IQ, PQ, and all of those documents telling you that what you intended to build is what you exactly built. There is nothing less and nothing more than what you said in your specification. It's a different world. There is no freedom there, right? I mean, you have to go according to the good automation manufacturing practices. It has to be documented. You have most of the time solutions which are delivered by the big players, right? I mean, there's Sartorius, Thermo Fisher, Merck, and many others who are providing the machines. They have a know-how, and the machine is putting at least three domain expertise. One is the process, meaning bioprocess, how the liquid is being handled, and so on. And this is how the machine is being built. Second one is this technical part, meaning how you put the sensors, what pumps, how you automate the process, right? And the third one is electronics plus maybe the hardware shape, hardware building the stainless steel, stainless tank is also requires quite a lot of knowledge. So maybe even 4 areas, I would say. And then most of the time, what you need to do is to become an integrator. Simply put, you need to integrate all of those machines, which are industrial heavy equipment. What you need to do as an integrator, you need to have a proper process to do that, meaning that you also need to document your work and that the entire line can be afterwards commissioned, qualified, validated, and being approved by to the production by the FDAs of this world. And that's a specific work, right? And what is there is you're using industrial solutions like historians to collect the data. The data has to be in IT world, it would be called unmutable. In biotech world, it's rather called single source of truth. You cannot just copy the data and to another store like in the cloud and start to do the process analytics on it and do the reasoning on how to change the process based on the data which was copied. In IT, nobody heard about it. Why you cannot copy the data? Yes, you cannot copy the data without the proper controls over it. There has to be a one and single source of truth based on which you are making decisions about the process, changing the process parameters and so on. If you copy it from historian to the cloud, you have a problem. You either need to have a mechanisms which will be assuring the total immutability that the data in local historian and the cloud are the same, and you can prove it to FDA, and then you can make analytics in the cloud while having data in the historian, or you need to have analytics next to historian based on this data from historian, right? Those are the challenges which you don't have in a kind of normal IT world. So this is one part, the manufacturing, heavy industrial equipment, specific solutions like historians and SCADAs and other things. Interesting, but also boring because there is not much freedom. Then there is another part, which is more on the research side, laboratories, process development, everything which goes a little bit beyond manufacturing. Still, when you are already on the phase of clinical trials, your system also have to be validated, and you cannot just exchange the data, because that's the whole point of clinical trials, to make sure that the data which you collect about the patients, about the drug production and so on are not changed, right? You cannot fake the data, because that's exactly what some people want to do if they are bad actors, trying to push the drug into production, into market, while changing the data during the clinical trials, saying everything was perfect. There is less strict rules. Specifically in R&D, you don't care, right? You just do the 10,000 compounds which you need to test, and you need speed, you need flexibility, and a lot of Excel flying around, and so on. And this is interesting world, because you have, again, multiple providers of the machines. In one simple lab which is producing monoclonal antibodies, for example, you can have 30 different types of equipment, with almost 30 different type of companies, vendors who are producing them. And the funny part about the biotech, because those machines require a lot of validation, paperwork, and so on, they are quite costly, both to produce and to build and to get all the certifications and to buy them afterwards. And you don't have a market for 10 million of units to be sold, right? I mean, the market is not so big. So what my perception is that many of those vendors who are building those machines, they invested a lot of money and time and effort to build a specific machine, and they let it be. So if there is a peristaltic pump, which is pumping the liquid in the lab, you don't touch it. You don't touch it for 15 years. So don't expect that it will have OPC UA or MQTT interface. Don't expect sometimes it will have any type of interface except of milliamps electrical signal going out from it to read the value or control the machine. And that's another challenge with connecting or digitizing the lab. And this is part of the project which we love a lot because it's just fun. It's like, okay, here is your lab, 30 equipments, everything talks with different protocol. Sometimes it doesn't talk at all. You need to integrate it. So everything is possible, right? I mean, so we are building a layered applications, layered platforms, trying to standardize first the connectivity with the machines, get the data, push the data. Once we have this, and depending on the needs, it's OPC UA, MQTT, whatever else, we start to also build, and it's a recurring theme. More and more people are aware of this. We are trying to build a kind of virtual data virtualization using ontologies, using data models, which are decoupling whatever the machines are under it and whatever data they are sending from the data on top of which you are building analytics. So even if you are exchanging the device and there is a data model change for the communication protocol, you still are putting it into one data model for the process and your analytics stays the same. And this is also a fun part because then you need the specialists from the technical part on the data, how you communicate with the machine, what sensor data you get, what actuators data you get. And then you need the process guys to understand what data is needed for the process. What does it mean? How you do the analytics on top of this data and so on. And those two worlds have to meet in the middle where you are doing the mappings and so on. Digitizing the lab in the current environment is a multidisciplinary team which is working definitely not in silos, because most of the time you are inside the organization. So there are process guys, IT guys, whatever, R&D guys, and you need to be all around them, talk with everybody, and have people who are talking data, process, IT infrastructure, and hardware, and sometimes electrical signals even. And on top of that, as you mentioned, bringing anything which is digitizing lab manufacturing increases the complexity of the infrastructure. So you also need to think about maintainability, support, and so on. It's not that you can push the update whenever you want to the machines. The implications of it can be drastic, specifically if there is an ongoing experiment which costs hundreds or millions sometimes of whatever currency, and you just decide that you want to update your whatever pump or operating system, and everything blows up. I mean, it's impossible. Support and maintenance of this is yet another beast.
You work in extremely challenging environment where the mindset is, if it is working, do not touch it because you will break it. But at the same time, you are tasked to extend the capabilities and the observability of existing working production system. Yeah, I totally understand the level of challenges that you're facing on your daily life. So your platform can also simulate the bioprocesses. Could you give us some more details around that? Because you described how the hardware is organized. You described at least very briefly the data and the challenges with moving data around. But in order to simulate a business process or bioprocess or whatever process, you need to have data, right? So how can you simulate bioprocess while being compliant with all the regulations regarding the data itself?
Okay, so there is quite a few things to unpack here. In biotech, there is no silver bullet when it comes to this process simulation. The process itself, meaning the mechanical process, pumping, fluid going from one tank to another, yeah, I guess that's simple simulation, but it doesn't bring you much. I mean, why would you do that? Process, the real process, meaning that you're trying to simulate the growth of the cells in the bioreactor, understanding the level of the yield which you are collecting to the downstream process where you are working already with filtration of their base and trying to get the proteins. That is super difficult, and it's by far not something which I think any single company can do alone, because again, you have a multidisciplinary team. Connect all those pieces together, it's super difficult. And I will come back to this. When we talk about simulation, we think about different domains. We are helping our customers as well to build their new machines. Sometimes we are building both the mechanics, meaning the tank with the new way of, I don't know, we built lately the photobioreactor, right? So we had to come up with the new way of lighting inside the tank itself, and so on, plus the entire automation. In order to build a device like this, you would like to also have some testing environment without always building a solution. Like, I mean, 5,000 liters bioreactor doesn't exactly fit on your desk. So you need to have a simulation of the machine. And this is where our automation guys are very proficient in it. So they are building simulators of the specific actuators and so on, so they can simulate how the machines will work. It will help us to determine how the control platform works, how the data storage works, how the data flow works, and so on. So we don't have to build a machine in order to simulate the machine behavior to test digital part of the solution. That's one simulation which we build. The other ones are going more towards process parts simulation, predictive analytics regarding process parameters. What will be your pH in the tank after 30 minutes? And this is already not so easy, because I saw a lot of companies trying to tackle biotech predictive maintenance or process prediction by simply throwing AI or ML technologies, and they say, yeah, we have great algorithms, give us just data, we will provide you with answers. The thing is, it works in a very limited space when you have limited parameters and huge amount of data. Both are not true for biotech. First of all, you don't have huge amount of data. You don't have thousands or millions of experiments for the same cell line, for the same feeding strategy, for the same conditions, size, and so on. And everything of all of those parameters in biotech matters. If you change your feed, the stuff which you are feeding your cells in the bioreactor, the output is different. So nobody is doing 100,000 experiments. It's super expensive. So you have few experiments at most. You have experiments which are varying when it comes to the parameters. And then if you just don't know what you're doing, you don't have a biotech experience, you don't know the biochemistry, all this stuff, which I also don't know much about, your machine learning approach is kind of useless. I mean, maybe you will find something by accident, but it will not be repetitive success. We saw the projects and we were taking part in those, again, with scientists, biotech scientists, data scientists, ML scientists, technology guys, and so on, to build the prediction models where operators in the lab could see, okay, in half an hour you will have a problem with your colony in the lab, right? You need to make some effort. And that's simpler, but still already very useful information. And now the top of complexity and awesomeness which you can do in the simulation is really a digital twin of the process. But that's, I would say, super complex. I mean, you have those companies like in Silicon Medicine, when they are building super advanced AI models using also transformers and so on, trying to do the protein foldings. Google is doing it, and so on. It's yet another beast. I will not go into this because I'm not an expert in it. But when it comes to the digital twin, which is much closer to the IoT technologies, because you get the data from the machine and you are trying first to learn something and then to predict how the cells or whatever else you're growing in the setup will behave. And how do you deal with lack of data? Well, you go into so-called hybrid modeling, which is getting a little bit of AI and ML for things which you don't know how they work, and you want to do the brute force black box approach. You have the data, you try to figure out the best outcome by different type of algorithms, and still it's difficult because how you validate such an algorithm, right? You remember that everything which you are putting to production, you need to validate. It means you need to describe what it will do and then demonstrate that this is doing exactly what you said it will do. How do you do it with machine learning? Difficult. Anyway, why hybrid models is because on the other side you are bringing hardcore math. It means you are bringing the mechanistic models You are bringing models which are describing specific things regarding how the cell is behaving, how the cell is expressing things which you are interested in, how it lactates, what is the glycalization profiles, and so on. And you have the specific equations for it, right? And you can try to predict them without having a prior data based on the equations. And then you are adding also computational fluid dynamics, for example, to understand how the cells and the feeding strategy will impact the movement of the cells in the bioreactor, depending on the shape of the vessel and the agitation and so on. And then you are trying to bring it all together in a stepwise approach, trying to predict that if you change this parameter, it will impact this mechanistic model, it will change this and that, and then you potentially might maximize your yield or whatever else you are trying to maximize in your bioreactor. But as you can see, it requires scientists from all over the place. It's not like a common knowledge that you can get the student and it will do it, he or she will do it. It's a multidisciplinary project, so I would be very untrue to what I'm saying to say that, yeah, we have such a platform which can do that. No, I don't think, I haven't seen anybody who has a comprehensive platform which can just do the digital twin for the biotech process. It's simply too complex for the time being.
Yeah, I love your statement that it is easy to simulate very simple processes, but you do not have a lot of value out of it. Value comes from simulating and building digital twins of extremely complex processes, but that requires in-depth domain knowledge from different domains, as you mentioned, and it is far from being trivial. One question regarding the data processing, because in order to build those digital twins, simulate predictive maintenance, all of that, we need to process data. From your perspective, especially in the biotech domain, where do you see the biggest need to process data? At the edge, so inside the lab, in the cloud backend, or maybe both? How do you handle that?
From my perspective, there are three places where you are doing something with the data, and it's edge, on-prem in general, and the cloud. It means that some things are happening on the device itself. Then you are extracting from the device to something which is still on premises, and again, fog, whatever you can call it, right? There is plenty of different buzzwords which are describing it, but embedded, edge, and cloud. Those are all viable options, and it depends what you want to do with data. The idea is that everything which is needed for the device to manage itself and its states and so on stays on the device and it's close to the device, because even if the network goes down, device has to work. In fact, device has to go into the safety state and so on, depending on the crash which you have. There has to be some data on the device, and let's call it embedded, whatever. Then there is edge, meaning, okay, there is some server or some infrastructure which holds the data and has some computational power on premises, close to the machines, so it's not going over the internet, over VPN somewhere else. And this is most of the time the critical data, because, by the way, the guys from biotech, they don't want to send the data to the cloud very often. First of all, sometimes it's a lot of data when it comes to the sensors reading. Second of all, it's an IP of the companies. They don't want to share it, and there is still a lot of risk on that the data would be leaked and so on. And it's all about their IP. They most of the time store the data, and when the auditors are coming, the data is in their data centers. Right? But then there is also cloud, which helps you with multiple things. First of all, to run advanced analytics where you need a lot of computational power, and it's like you can extend the computational power, right? Depending on your peaks, you can leverage the cloud. Second of all, if you want to build a robust infrastructure for the platform, for collaboration, for accessing the data, for bringing in multiple people from multiple locations, cloud is perfect. You can have already pre-processed data or the copy of the data with some specific constraints, and the people then can use cloud to access it. It's much easier than to give them access to some specific server standing somewhere in your data center. So it's better to secure one connection, cloud data center, and then secure the cloud from multiple endpoints, than to bring in everybody for some hardcore VPN, whatever DMZs inside your infrastructure. That's why we are leveraging all, right? I mean, we are doing the embedded software, we are doing the classical server-side softwares on-prem, let's call it edge, and we also do the cloud.
I agree with you. Like it is always best to fit the right tool for a job, right? And
Yeah,
device needs to be able to work offline. At least most of devices should have those capabilities. Then
yeah,
we've got the edge gateways or whatever you call them, so that the local infrastructure that can orchestrate the environment in case of the network issues. And we've got cloud because cloud provides unlimited computation and storage capabilities for those analytics purposes mostly, right? And
correct.
to have that a single pane of glass, if you've got multiple facilities, you can see all of them using one dashboard. So I totally understand that approach, and I think it is very well architected in order to provide the value for various stakeholders, because you've got number of stakeholders that you work with. I've got one last question for you. What could you suggest to someone with deep technical knowledge thinking about starting an IoT business? You've got very strong IT foundations, and then you started a business in the biotech. If someone would like to do something as you, would you recommend that? Like, is the effort worth it? Basically, that's what I'm trying to ask. Or do you think that staying in the IT zone just purely with those abstract objects instead of working with OT challenges? What's your take on
Right,
that?
right. It's very personal, I think, because it really depends what drives you. I mean, I still, although I'm not as proficient at some point I was, I still like to program a little bit and do some experiments, specifically data related. But what I found is that first of all, I need something which I feel has a higher purpose, right? And it has an impact, a much bigger impact, which you can get by only applying the digital technologies. Because look, at the end, we are human beings. I mean, we have a flesh and bones, and we are living in the physical world. So there has to be a physical component to things which matter to us. We need to eat. We need to have healthy bodies. We need to have things around us to live, right? I mean, except of food, some other things it's also good to have. That's why manufacturing and biotech were things where you combine everything digital, but also this physical aspect. I mean, if we can tackle biotech and heal the world and feed the world, that's already a big success. If we can add to this sustainable production, that people have what they need, the main products which are needed for living in a sustainable way, in a cost effective way, with the automation of all logistical chains. I mean, that's exactly what pushes the entire civilization to the front. And then you can argue, I mean, there is a purely digital part. It's also important, and don't get me wrong, but I don't think our world will become way better with another TikTok platform. I mean, it can be more interesting, entertaining, sure, and there is plenty of money there. Evaluations of those companies are huge because you have 7 or 8 billion customers potentially, right? I mean, different scale even, and that's okay if you want to do that. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I needed something else. I needed to understand that even small contribution to these critical things which are pushing us forward as a species is worth trying. And also at the end, if you like to focus on one thing, stay with digital. But I always was a rather interested in things which I don't know yet. So that was it's so super interesting to understand a bit more about biotech. It's not rocket science. I mean, it is super difficult and broad, but you can learn it. If you learned IT, you can learn biotech. I mean, the cells and the design on the molecular level is somehow translatable to the IT and so on. You can find parallels. So if you like to learn new things, automation, huge field with different laws and so on, you can learn a lot about it. What I would say, if somebody wants to start this journey, just be patient because you will not learn it over the weekend. I mean, you will not learn it over the weekend. You will not learn it from the books only. You have to have an access to the practitioners. In fact, the best way to learn is, except of reading about the theory so you understand what you are talking about, is to be on the projects which are dealing with it, with this specific topic. And I think my personal look at this is totally worth it. It's totally worth it because your brain expands when it comes to the so many new things which you haven't heard about before.
Speaking about learning from people that got hands-on experience, what's the best way to contact you, to follow your journey, and basically to learn from you and learn about solutions that you offer?
Right. So I think the best start is on our website, A4BEE.com. Plus, you can always contact me on LinkedIn directly as well, because I'm quite often there. In fact, all the time there. So don't hesitate to drop me a message or connect with me, and I will definitely respond. Sometimes with short delay. If you want to see what we are doing, we are trying to publish things on our website and also on LinkedIn, and we are starting the new series where we will go in depth more about our inventions, our R&D department, what we are doing, what we are working on, and what we are playing with, because sometimes we are doing things just for fun to understand new technologies. So stay tuned. I think we will post more videos on LinkedIn. Maybe we'll enter YouTube as well.
Perfect. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your insights with me and with the audience. I think that was super insightful. We covered a lot of ground outside the core biotech domain, but I believe that was a really, really good meeting. Thank you for listening. Go to thefingers.com to find more materials about the Internet of Things domain. My name is Lukasz Paciorkowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer.